Hey everybody, it's your old pal Wood Doofus here. I just finished making some of these flags, and for the first time I used an epoxy resin finish, and I wanted to walk you through the process that I did to use this tabletop epoxy. So this is the Total Boat tabletop epoxy. It is a 1-to-1 ratio. I will put all the links to this in the description if you want to buy these on Amazon. And this tabletop epoxy consists of two elements, which is the resin itself and then a hardener. So the resin is A and the hardener is B. For this size flag, I'm going to be using 1/3 cup of each element in the mixture. And we'll start with part A, which is the resin. Now you're going to see that this resin has an opaque color and it's very viscous or very thick. And so to get the measurement right, you're going to have to walk up on it carefully. You want to go ahead and get close to it. I use my little wooden things to cut it off and let it settle. And then I check to see if I got my 1/3. If I don't, I just put a little bit at a time more in there until I get my 1/3 cup. So once I get the 1/3 cup, I move on to part B, which is the hardener. Now, if I was gonna have an error in the mixture, I would make sure I'd put more hardener than resin, just to make sure it doesn't get sticky at the end. Now, this hardener is thinner and it's clear, it's not opaque, so you can tell the difference. In fact, you can look at the end result here, you can see the two elements before they get mixed. Now on the container, it recommends that you mix this for 2 minutes. I would not mess with that at all. I would mix it for the full 2 minutes and make sure that it's fully mixed, because if you don't, you could have too much resin in some pockets and it could result in a sticky situation at the end, which is really hard to fix. I put 2-inch screws in the bottom of these flags so they could sit proud of the table, which would make applying the resin easier in the end. Now you'll see I'll take this mixture and I'll just distribute it across the surface of the flag. I don't want to put it all in one place. I want to spread it out so that when I get the spreader, it's a lot easier to move it around. You do want to make sure when you spread it that you get the edges to the sides, and it'll stick there well enough over time. Now when I use the spreader, you make sure you find something to spread it with that is pretty stiff, because I found that it can be difficult to spread this stuff if you don't have some force behind it. And it takes a while to move it in all the different nooks and crannies. And so just take your time. It's not going to dry up on you anytime soon, so just get it where you need it to be. Get it on the edges, get it on the sides, and then you want to also double check for any kind of voids. I put a coat of polyurethane on first, and then I used a light to look for voids after I'd spread it, just to make sure I can see any possibility of the epoxy messing up on me. Then I move on to the blowtorch, and the blowtorch is there to get the bubbles out, and you'll see the bubbles kind of pop as you use it very lightly. You can also use a heat gun for this, which might be a little bit easier to use. So this is the end result, and it turned out pretty well. All right, so now a couple pitfalls to avoid that I noticed. If you have dips in your flag, like anybody that makes a wavy flag does, sometimes that epoxy is going to want to settle in the low spots. And if it settles too much, it could get a little cloudy, so you might want to revisit it every once in a while when you're done, to make sure it doesn't pool too deeply. And if it does, just kind of scoop it out and spread it somewhere on the side to keep those deep pools from occurring. Another thing is, no matter how hard you try, you might end up with some voided space somewhere on your surface where the epoxy didn't settle and it kind of slid off, and you have kind of a bare spot. So in that case, I would recommend just mixing a little after it dries and doing a little touch-up coat. Just make sure if you're mixing a little bit that you still have the ratios right. That can be challenging. Now, when I look at the back of these bottles, it says like 6 hours of drying time. I noticed that you want to give it a good 24 hours before you touch it. It just isn't, it's not going to settle overnight or anything like that. Give it a solid 24 hours. Just to be sure, because if you touch it before that, you could leave a fingerprint that's permanent, and you don't want to do that, especially if you're selling these things. Besides that, I appreciate you watching. Make sure you check out the link in the description for the products in this video, and as always, don't be afraid to be a doofus.